Hello and welcome to the Plant-Based Revolution podcast with your host, myself, Neil Damrell from My Lifestyle Coach. Really excited you for taking the time out of your precious day again to spend with me, and I'm excited to introduce the next guest on the show, a friend of mine, Mrs. Laura Wimmer, formerly Laura Wilson. I've known Laura for probably about 10 years now. We met mutually in the gym that I worked in at the time. She's a very big advocate and passionate promoter of a plant-based diet. She's an experienced health and weight loss coach. She also competed in many endurance events such as ultra marathons and marathons. She's a trained nutritionist and has been researching nutrition and health since 1999 and focuses on the secrets of achieving optimum physical well-being no matter what your starting point is. Laura, got to know Laura very well. She told me her story, which will go on, and she'll tell you in more detail herself during the episode. But she was overweight, unfit smoker when she was at university, and then turned into a more vibrant ultramarathon runner, and has also gone on to help thousands of people all around the world to improve their health in a natural way and get back into shape, look younger, and in some cases heal some serious diseases like type 2 diabetes and IBS and Crohn's. So Laura is a former medical research manager for the UK health organisation, and she's also had her own book published, The Alkaline 5 Diet, which is available in all bookshops. And she also has her own podcast called Internal Health, which is also available over on iTunes, and is the organiser of the Natural Health and Vitality Conference, which I actually attended years ago in Totnes, which is a very good conference full of good health speakers there, and very inspiring event too. So she does run in the future. Definitely recommend you attending. It was very good. So during today's episode, it was really good to catch up with Laura. I haven't spoken to Laura for a while, but it really helped just to really get into her story, where she came from, as I said, why she changed and the benefits she achieved by going more of a plant-based, and at some points in her life, completely vegan and raw at times, so kind of very extreme ends of the spectrum. We also discussed with Laura how she has changed in her diet over the last year or two in terms of incorporating more meat and dairy products in her diet, where before she was very strict vegan for a good number of years, and how that has changed her in terms of her health, as it improved her partner's health as well, and why were the reasons for her to go more away from that plant-based or that vegan extreme kind of lifestyle, and the confrontations that she experienced when she did that with the community that she worked with, and also the vegan community as well, which was a very good, insightful discussion about those two extremes. And I think you guys will really, really learn a lot from this. And for me, it was great to see and hear Laura's perspective, especially because she's come from such a real strong vegan footing over the last few years, in the community that she was around, and how at some points I do agree with what Laura's mentioned in the interview and during our chat, that the extreme elements of a vegan diet, and also the community that vegans tend to associate with, can be not always as positive as they make out, and can be sometimes detrimental to other people's well-being in terms of them trying to improve their own health because of the values that they possess within the vegan community. So certainly not an attack on the vegan community, but it's a really good perspective to understand two sides of the story, and hopefully help you understand where we're coming from in terms of maybe having more of a balanced approach to your diet and not feeling that any extreme is going to be beneficial to you, because generally, like most diets, if they are too extreme, they tend to be less achievable and sustainable long term. So it is a really good chat to kind of see both sides of the coin, as I said. So without further ado, I'm just going to pass over to the interview now, and I hope you really enjoy this episode with Mrs. Laura Rimmer. Okay, Laura, thank you very much for coming on to the Plant-Based Revolution podcast. It's great to see you, and I just wanted to, for the listeners, just to introduce yourself. Obviously, I've known you for a number of years now, but for obviously anyone that's listening, then just give us a brief introduction to who you are, and we'll get into the interview.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Laura Rimmer, formerly Laura Wilson. So yeah, I've known you for probably getting on 10 years. I was trying to think about it the other day. It's a good few years, isn't it? So we knew each other from the gym, didn't we?
Yeah.
And yes, I am a nutritionist. So I've been a nutritionist for a number of years, a health coach for 10 years. And typically I coach people online. So I've got clients all over the world. At the moment, I'm coaching people from Germany, America, Australia, UK, South Africa. So yeah, I work mainly kind of in this kind of setting, face to face on Skype and online, with one-to-one coaching clients and group coaching. And I help people with everything from losing weight to starting an exercise program and I've really worked with people with lots of different health issues over the years. So things like Crohn's, colitis, IBS, IBD. So a lot of like intestinal and digestive type problems, but also people with cancer and type 2 diabetes. I've helped one of my clients who I worked with over a period of 10 months to completely reverse her type 2 diabetes. And I've held a couple of health conferences. So the Natural Health and Vitality Conference, which I think you came to, didn't you, Neil, in Dartington?
Yeah, it was really good. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm author of the book published on Hay House called The Alkaline 5 Diet. So I started off with a real kind of slant in my work towards eating lots of plant-based and alkaline forming foods. So things like a lot of leafy greens and wheatgrass juice, that type of stuff. So that's where I've kind of come from. Hence, I wrote the book, The Alkaline 5 Diet, on that kind of area of nutrition. And more recently, I've started a podcast called the Eternal Health Podcast. So that's me in a nutshell, if you like.
Yeah, excellent. Because obviously we've known each other. You say we met in the gym. That must have been going back to, I would say, probably close to like 10 years now. It would have been. And so I know we both have a real passion for plant-based living and helping people be healthier. But when I first met you, obviously I got to know you in terms of your backstory, but for other people that are new to you, what kind of made you change go into more of an alkaline plant-based diet? What was, I kind of say no one's really born following a really perfect diet. Well, it's not a perfect diet, but kind of a healthier mindset. We've all kind of had our kind of journeys and catalysts to change. So what was your catalyst to change, and what kind of led to that beforehand as well?
I think you're totally right. None of us are born, not in this day and age, healthy. And in fact, in one of my talks I give, I say that we're all on the unhealthy train like that. I think that's the default setting. And I certainly was on that unhealthy train for many years. So by default, we're on that train and it's going to a place that's not a good destination. So it's either going to be being overweight, with no energy, serious health issues, or probably a combination of all three of those. And I found myself at age 19, so I was at university studying law, and I just felt that I had no energy. I had a foggy mind all the time, so I only had about 18 hours of lectures a week. But I just found it a real struggle to get out of bed in the mornings. I was getting up kind of like midday every day. and going to lectures and just having a foggy brain. I wasn't able to remember things well, just struggling to do my essays and things. And that was a result of just eating the wrong foods, doing the wrong stuff. So I was smoking at the time, smoking only about 5 cigarettes a day, but yeah, obviously not good for your health. A lot of drinking, so typical student nights out 2, 3, 4 times a week, and not just having 1 or 2 beers, having like 5, 6, 7 or more. And also in catered halls of residence, eating a lot of stodgy foods, so a lot of fried foods, greasy foods, sausages, deep fried chips, and then going into university and eating what I thought was quite healthy, something like a Subway sandwich, which is just white refined bread with some kind of processed meat in it. So really not in a good place in terms of my diet and health. And by the end of that kind of first, second year of university, just felt like an old woman, a really old, decrepit woman in a young woman's body, had no fitness. And I was losing self-confidence as well because I didn't feel good at all in my body and mind. So I knew at the end of that first year that something had to change. And not really knowing anything at all about health and fitness, I thought, well, the best thing I can do is probably join a gym. So that's what I did. I went to the gym about 2 or 3 times a week. I remember the first mile I ran on a treadmill, I felt like I was going to have a heart attack. It was like super slow, probably like a 12-minute mile, I should imagine. And yeah, just didn't feel good at all. But I remember leaving the gym afterwards and then feeling good. And, we know all about this, don't we, now as runners? Like you now, 15 years on, I've completed marathons and ultra marathons and half marathons, and that feeling of fitness is wonderful, isn't it? It's just a joy. So for me, pretty much the first time that I went to the gym and started running, I felt that runner's high, or the endorphins. So that encouraged me to keep going. And eventually, I was able to run 2 miles, 3 miles, 5 miles in a shorter time than the 12-minute mile pace. But I was still leaving the gym and like lighting up a cigarette and going home and eating McDonald's and things for a good period of time. But then probably a year or so later, it just dawned on me, it makes no real sense to be putting all this effort now into the gym and getting fit, but still fueling my body in the wrong way. So by age 21, I'd given up smoking and really started studying nutrition. So especially once I graduated from university, moved back home to Devon, and just started researching a lot. I really made it my mission. By this point, I thought, look, I've only got one life. I need to work this thing called health out, because I didn't really have anyone around me telling me about health. I think my parents, did the best they can, but they were certainly not nutritional experts. So I thought, I've got to get this thing sorted. So just embarked on a long period of research. And I remember just pretty much using myself as a guinea pig. And I would try different diets out for maybe like a week or 2 at a time and just see the effect it had on my performance at the gym, kind of weight levels, energy levels, sleep, recovery from the gym as well. So I remember trying the Atkins diet for a couple of weeks and thought that didn't work for me. I tried the paleo diet, so really went high on protein. That didn't really work. But I found that the best thing for me at that time was eating much more plant-based food, so lots of leafy greens, lots of whole grains, things like that. And by eating that way, I was able to really just maximize my performance at the gym and maintain a good level of weight and just have a lot of energy. So I ate that way for a good few years and started running my first half marathons on that type of diet. And then in 2008, I went to a seminar in London, Anthony Robbins seminar. Yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know, Anthony Robbins is like this big American success coach. And I went to the Excel Centre in London, and I was there with about 12,000 other people for 4 days. And he just took us through this whole seminar of like peak performance, and you can believe in yourself, and anything you want to do, you know, go for it in life. So it was a really encouraging 4 days. But the very last day was all about diet and health. And he started talking about this thing called the alkaline diet. And at the time, I had no idea what that was. And once he got into the specifics of it, saying, well, you know, we need to be eating alkaline forming foods. So things rich in chlorophyll, like leafy greens and wheatgrass juice and spinach and all that kind of stuff. Because he was explaining that it's so full of sunlight energy, that it really energizes and heals our body. And I thought, well, okay, that's the kind of diet I've been following for a good few years now anyway. So when I heard Anthony Robbins kind of promoting this, I came home, thought about it more, and then really started looking into that specific area and researching and writing, and started up my website, Alkaline Diet Health Tips, in 2008, at the end of 2008, to just write on this topic. So that's how I kind of got into the alkaline diet.
Yeah. So, and when you're on the alkaline diet, so, you know, it is very sort of plant-based driven, but did you focus on like the raw element a lot, as well as the, you know, because there's quite a movement of people having more of a raw alkaline diet, or just a raw diet, as well as, you know, obviously a cooked diet. But, you know, what was your balance between the two? Did you kind of go into a raw aspect quite a bit throughout that process as well?
Well, not to start with, no. I was eating more cooked foods. But that being said, I always like to include something like a green smoothie at some point throughout my day. So for sure, there was definitely a proponent of raw foods. And I would usually just throw together, you know, a big handful of spinach, some celery, cucumber, lemon juice, an apple or a banana, blend it all up and have my green smoothie. And I did that for many years and still do now. But I wasn't really having a completely raw diet. In what year was it? Probably 2010, I went and did a 7-day water fast. And that was quite tough, obviously, just not eating for 7 days. And once I finished that, the guys that, because I went away to a retreat, and the guys that led it said to us very clearly, look, you can't, after doing a water fast, don't just go back to your normal way of eating, especially not eating really dense, like protein and fat rich foods, because it will be a real overload on your system. So they suggested that we follow a raw vegan diet for at least a week or two. So that's what I did. I did follow a raw diet, for a good couple of weeks. And then from then tried to go very high raw. So I'd have some cooked foods, but the majority of my foods were raw. And that worked for a little while. What I would say on that is that it's great for a cleanse or a fast or a detox. And I've done Jason Vale's 7-day juicing thing as well a couple of times. But for me, I think that's probably unsustainable over the long term. And later research that I've done backs that up. And I think now it's good, probably good for anybody to do a cleanse, a raw cleanse, but not necessarily over the long term. And I spent a couple of weeks out in Thailand a few years ago with a lot of raw vegans there, and some ex-raw vegans. And what was interesting was the people that used to be raw, and I'm talking people who are raw vegan for like 20 years, who are no longer raw vegan, said that it worked okay for a few years, but a lot of them started to experience health issues. And actually a few people I spoke to said that they had children, and those children had health issues from a very early age. So one guy had a daughter, and when she was born, she had completely black teeth. And that's not an uncommon thing, apparently. So, yeah.
It's interesting actually to highlight. I'm glad you highlighted that, because I think, you know, as a coach yourself, we want to try and get away from people kind of jumping on these kind of quick fixes, which they kind of almost looked at to a certain point. And obviously, like you said, you can't really maintain that sustainably long term. And also, obviously, they grab the attention because they're quite extreme, and obviously, you are going to cut out quite a lot of, you know, the Western kind of foods that most people consume. So you are going to see, improvement in your health. But
Yeah.
how has your sort of diet evolved throughout that, and how has your health kind of fluctuated in terms of when you're on certain aspects of that diet? Where did you feel the best? When did you feel were you lacking energy in terms of getting enough nutrients, protein, in terms of your overall diet, when you're running the marathons and all that kind of thing? So about to talk as it starts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so between the years 2004 and 2005, I ran Paris Marathon in both of those years. And in 2004, I was following quite a good diet. What I would say at that point was a good diet. Certainly trying to cut down on a lot of unhealthy stuff, but not super focused on it, I would guess. But by 2005, I'd pretty much completely got rid of all refined vegetable oils, certainly hydrogenated oils, white refined sugar for the most part. I was having a little bit, maybe a bit of dark chocolate once or twice a week, and was eating pretty much plant-based at that point. And between those 2 years, in 2004, I ran Paris in 4 hours 48. And then the following year, I managed to knock a whole hour off my time. So I did it in 3 hours 48, which I was quite pleased with. It's not super fast, but for me, I didn't do a whole lot more training. So a lot of that was definitely down to a change in diet. So I felt really good, certainly with my running and endurance and recovery and that kind of stuff on a purely plant-based diet. I think I had a bit of meat and dairy here and there at that point. I didn't go completely plant-based till what year? About 2010. But I would say I was about 80% plant-based. That was good. However, what I found was I wasn't eating enough fat. And that caused problems with my sleep. So I had insomnia at that point for a few years. And when I went to the doctor, he said to me, "Oh, well, you're depressed." So tried to give me some depression tablets. And I told him I wasn't depressed. He wanted to argue with me and give me some tablets, but I refused to take them. Came home and thought, okay, that's not a solution. I'm going to have to work this out on my own. So after a lot of research and kind of tracking my macronutrients and exactly what I was eating for a good couple of months, I would say, it was very obvious that my levels of good fats were way too low. So I started upping my fats, eating more nuts, seeds, things like avocado oil, walnut oil, that type of stuff. And immediately my sleep got a lot better. So that I felt really healthy at that point. Went completely plant-based vegan in 2010, and I was so I don't like to call myself a vegan because veganism is very much associated with a movement and certainly, a big stand for animal welfare and that kind of stuff. And whilst I agree with animal welfare and, helping save the planet, I think I don't like to be associated with that whole kind of political agenda, because for me, it's always been more about health, and I'm not as dogmatic as many vegans that I've met. But I did go completely plant-based in, I think it was 2010. I've been trying to work it out, but I think it's then. And right up until 2017, so for 7 years, completely plant-based. And I've got to be honest, in that time and over that period, I wrote my book, The Alkaline 5 Diet. And in that book, I promote eating 5 meals a day. So you have a blood cleanser, you have a vitamin vitality meal. So your blood cleanser is something very chlorophyll rich, so like wheatgrass juice or barley grass juice, which cleanses your blood. A vitamin vitality meal, which is your kind of fruit-based meal. A raw alkaline mineral meal, which is, your raw leafy greens. So again, something like a green smoothie would cover that. A fat loss sugar meal. And I did write that somewhat facetiously because at the time there was such a movement against having any form of sugar, any form of fructose. There was a big thing against fruit as well when I was writing that book. So I wrote this somewhat facetiously. So that was a meal which was heavy in sweet fruits like dates or bananas. And that served me really well at the time when I was running ultra marathons. And then your final meal would be a hearty cooked fibre meal. So whole grains, starches, potatoes, with again more vegetables and some, you know, nice sauce of some kind. So that's the kind of diet I followed for many years, and I had great results on that. I lost weight, maintained, you know, a lean physique, had great mental clarity, good skin, no health issues whatsoever. So yeah, that's where I was for many years. In this year, I've changed somewhat. So
Yeah,
yeah, happy to talk about that if you want.
because you said you know, before we started that you've kind of gone more not a vegan anymore. You sort of mentioned about the label, and that's what I kind of really want to get across with the show, is that is a plant-based diet rather than being a vegan. And for me, I don't like being called a vegan because I'm not a vegan, and my stance on animal welfare is maybe not as strong as some vegans. I do think that, you know, cutting down on meat and dairy is going to help the planet, and that's what I'm very passionate about as well. But I think there's need to be that kind of social balance as well, because from my perspective anyway, I feel there's a bit of social pressure that comes with being a vegan, and there's a lot of people that would quickly discourage what you do in terms of if you have meat. They will, rather than encourage that you are being healthier and you're reducing your meat consumption, if you have a bit of meat, they'll, you know, jump on you and say, why are you eating meat? So did you,
Yeah.
I mean, is that the kind of same pressures? Did you feel those kind of same social pressures or personal pressures while you're on an alkaline diet, before you've, you know, now you're sort of switching at the moment? So
Yes. Yeah, I absolutely did. Before I went completely plant-based, then people in the vegan community, I felt that they were judging me, because I used to hang around with quite a few vegans. I went to like a couple of vegan festivals in Thailand. So when I went completely plant-based, and having written a book that was about a completely plant-based diet, I started getting asked to speak at vegan events. So I spoke at Veg Fest in Bristol, lots of local events, events in London and in Thailand. I spoke there as well. So became and also through my publisher, I was invited to do a lot of things, so became part of the vegan community, if you like. There was a lot of pressure, and I remember a couple of times turning up at vegan events, and if I had, you know, like a leather handbag or something, or leather shoes, just being very some people were very, very frosty to me. And I thought to myself, well, actually, I've bought these things secondhand. I buy a lot of my clothes secondhand. So what exactly is the big issue with that? And I just felt this just a real dogma around, if you eat plant-based, you must be vegan. And if you're not completely vegan, then you're a very bad person and you shouldn't be here and whatever. So interestingly, when I announced on my podcast, Eternal Health, about a month ago, that I was no longer vegan, and contacted a few people who invite me to speak in our local vegan community to listen to the podcast, mainly out of courtesy, because I knew that there was vegan events coming up. I knew I'd get invited to speak and be put on the flyer. So I said, look, out of courtesy, here's my position, here's how it has changed. Sent them a link to my podcast, and I had no less than 250 vitriolic comments on my newsfeed on Facebook and on YouTube. Everything from "you are going to hell," "you're a very bad person," to, you know, "you complete hypocrite," and everything in between, basically. So yeah, a lot of judgment, a lot of backlash from that, and the net thing that's come out, you know, it doesn't really bother me. I'm not really fussed what people think, just because I'm eating now a bit of meat and dairy. Like, is that really the end of the world? But what interestingly it's done is that my non-vegan friends who've observed this conversation have said to me, these people are they're very angry. They're not peace and love, because they claim to be, you know, for the planet, for the animals, and this kind of peace and love and kindness vibe, but that is the complete opposite to the way they conducted themselves certainly on my Facebook newsfeed. So actually, I think they've really harmed their cause by behaving in that way. And I don't think that's an isolated event. I've seen that firsthand towards other people as well many times over the years. And I think vegans it is like a religion. It's not particularly good. Plant-based, great, but I think that there should be able to be a dialogue, and if we have to work out what's good for us, and I think we need to be open-minded and to be able to enter into a discussion rather than have these very heated, very vitriolic arguments about things, because at the end of the day, it's only eating. It's important for all of us, but we should be free in our society of free speech and whatever else to make our own choices.
Yeah, it's very true, Laura. I mean, that's really interesting what you said about the comments, because I feel also there's a miscommunication with people saying they're plant-based. I've seen a few people create groups and then they're a plant-based group, but they'll highlight that it excludes meat, dairy. So it's like, well, that's still a vegan, but they've just repackaged it as a plant-based group. And so I think for me, a plant-based movement is more people can consume plants, but not give up meat if they don't want to. But the problem is, I think, what you found is that because we try and label too many things in society, that's causing social pressure to be one way or the other, where if the majority of the people, and obviously we can see from the stats that meat consumption and dairy consumption is reducing, but that's going to be beneficial to the planet, but it's not going to ever disappear because it's massive infrastructure in terms of the economy. There'll always be meat and dairy available, and if they can just encourage more people to kind of have a healthier diet, that we know ourselves that the less meat and dairy you have will help improve your health, but you don't have to give up completely, so.
Well, the interesting thing is, and I've only come across this research in the last 6 months or so, but we have to make a distinction between conventional meat and dairy and well-reared, organic, kind of grass-fed meat and dairy, because one, not so much in our country here, but it is definitely on the rise, but certainly in America and other places. But we certainly have got it here, just to a lesser extent. Things like CAFOs, so concentrated animal feeding environments in these big factory farms. So, if any of our listeners have seen things like Food Inc., and all these other documentaries like Cowspiracy about how they will treat animals like a commodity, pack them into these huge factories in effect with no windows because they don't want people seeing in, they don't want to see what's going on in there. And the cows, for example, have no room to move. They are just penned in, literally like in a prison environment, milked endlessly, repeatedly made pregnant, and as soon as they have their baby, the calf's taken away. So certainly there is a real animal cruelty thing, and I'm all for treating animals fairly and ethically. But that's a massive difference between that and the cows that are out to graze in a field in the sunshine, that are able to, give birth to their calf, rear that calf, be milked, sure, throughout that period, because cows, like humans, produce an excess of milk. So it's perfectly fine to milk that cow and feed its baby at the same time. That's not an issue. Whereas these animals in factory farms are routinely pumped full of hormones, antibiotics, steroids, because they contract things like mastitis because of the bad conditions. So there's a world apart, certainly in terms of the nutritional profile, between dairy from a factory farmed cow and dairy milk from, an organic pasture raised cow. But also in terms of the, and interestingly, I think, in terms of the,
all right, cool.
So interestingly as well, in terms of the environment, then cows being able to graze on land and in fields actually improves the quality of the land and improves the environment, because it improves the quality of the humus, which is the top layer of the soil. And statistics show, and there's lots of reports that show, that if you just do arable crops, so plant-based crops on farming land, that actually is worse for it depletes the soil of nutrients and minerals over the years, depletes the humus, so you get more flooding of fields and things. So actually the best way to do farming is to graze animals for a couple of years and then grow crops and rotate it, which is what traditional farmers have done for centuries. So there's reports out which show the effect on the environment, and actually organic farming, natural farming, trumps plant-based farming for kind of saving the planet. Yeah. And vegans don't want to see these reports.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, that's the first I've heard about it, obviously, but
just to let you know, there's a book called I think it's called Cows Save the Planet, which talks in depth on this. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Because there is a real fight between, the kind of meat and dairy industry and the kind of plant-based industry. And it's almost like, rather than working together to try and improve everybody's health, it's like, well, you either have this or you have this. It's kind of down the middle, either side of the fence, rather than actually trying to work together to actively save the planet and save people's health by consuming less. But it's like good quality meat rather than just factory reared, mass produced meat, that kind of thing. So and what was your reason? Obviously you've done a bit more research on that, but in terms of your own health, was there a reason that you felt that you needed to start consuming more meat as well in the last year?
Well, so my husband didn't do particularly well on a completely plant-based diet. He's a super fast endurance runner and doesn't like to eat a huge amount of food. And for 3 years, bless him, he went completely plant-based and just saw a kind of decline in his energy levels and really wasn't getting on well with it. So we just started I just started doing a lot more research, and being a Christian, prayed about it as well. So we're both praying about it. And I just felt, I felt kind of God moving me in a direction, and suddenly came across this whole body of research that I'd previously ignored. So, and that's because I was following, and this is to my kind of folly, if you like, I was following the big vegan gurus, if you like, back in about 2010, 2011, and they completely, attacked the work of organizations like the Weston A. Price Foundation, because the Weston A. Price Foundation says that we should be eating good quality meat and dairy, and they've got extensive articles and papers and things on why. But the attack the vegans had on these groups was that these organizations are headed up by people who aren't athletes. So, for example, Sally Fallon Morell, head of the Weston A. Price Foundation, is slightly overweight. So the guys I was following would say, she's not fit, she's not cycling up mountains, she's not running marathons, she's overweight, therefore we're not going to listen to her. And to my folly, I got kind of swept along with that and just said, okay, I'll just ignore that whole body of research. I've come back to it in the last 6 months and looked at this in depth, and it's amazing stuff. And this woman and her organization are speaking truth. It's well backed up by science, by a lot of different angles. And the fact that Sally Fallon Morell is slightly overweight, she's a 76-year-old woman for a start, and she's not claiming to be, super fit. But what I noticed about her and various other people who promote a higher fat, lower carb diet, which is the opposite to what I was doing before. So I was doing low fat, high carb when I was doing all my endurance events. What I found with watching these people is that, so Sally Fallon, for example, would deliver a 2.5 hour presentation at her events without flinching, without getting flustered, without forgetting anything. she had such mental clarity and such sharpness about her. I was like, okay, this is interesting. As well as the content was like super well backed up, well researched, unlike the vegan ranters who just were throwing dirt at
Yeah.
these people. They had actually no real science behind them. So I found her organization. I found the work of people like Gary Taubes, who spent 10 years researching into the benefits of a higher fat diet and why we shouldn't be eating lots and lots of whole grains and why we need saturated fat on our diet. So that was the big turning point for me. When I saw that saturated animal fat was actually really good for us, because prior to understanding that, I thought that saturated animal fat equals higher cholesterol equals heart disease. That's bad news. So therefore, meat and dairy and animal fats in any form need to be out of my diet. So that was my reasoning for a plant-based diet, the main one. So as soon as I realized that actually saturated animal fats is good. Why is it good? Because our body is made up of a lot of cholesterol. When there's a study out done a few years ago that showed that students, for example, when they are going through exam times, they all have much higher cholesterol levels. That's not a bad thing. The last thing you want to be doing when people exhibit higher cholesterol in times of stress is put them on something like a statin to lower that cholesterol, because cholesterol is a way to it's like an emergency defense in the body when we go through times of stress. So similarly, if you have a cut on your body, if you have some kind of injury, cholesterol will be higher, because that's your body producing this inflammatory response to heal, basically. So I really looked in depth at the body of research by people like Gary Taubes, Professor Tim Noakes. So you'd probably find him interesting, Neil.
Yeah.
He went from high carb, low fat, doing super long endurance events, gave himself type 2 diabetes through too many carbs, and then completely changed his diet to low fat and a ketogenic diet. High fat ketogenic diet. So finding this whole raft of research that I previously ignored changed everything for me. And I'm not someone who kind of faffs around for too long. Once I discovered this, and I'm not really proud in terms of like, well, I've written a book, this is all on the plant-based diet. I was like, whatever, if this is the truth, I'm happy to change. So went out, got myself a big organic steak from Sainsbury's, cooked it up, ate it, felt thoroughly sick for 3 days because I hadn't eaten meat for almost 10 years. And then realized that's probably not the best way to ease myself into eating meat after so long. But that was a good few months ago now. And I just feel like I'm thriving. Now I'm including, free range organic eggs, having lots of nice omelets and buttered vegetables, grass-fed butter is amazing. It's got vitamin D3, K2, which is hard to get on an exclusively plant-based diet. I'm just really enjoying this way of eating. And the other thing is, with the theme of finding well-sourced animal-based foods, I've been going around to our local farms, and I've built up quite a good relationship with organic farmers. And there's a goat farm that produces raw goat's milk, which is amazing. It's so delicious. It's full of probiotics, all the things that when you heat treat and pasteurize dairy milk is all gone, like your L-arginine and all your amino acids and things, which are all denatured under pasteurization, are all there in high quality raw organic milk. So I'm thriving on it, really enjoying it, and my husband is as well. So that was the reasoning, really.
And in terms of when you say the cholesterol side of things, because I measure people's cholesterol every day, and obviously when they have high levels of cholesterol, the first thing I ask is, how much meat and dairy do you have, and especially they've quite high amounts of cheese generally. So when you said the stress response, because most of the time I am measuring people's cholesterol within a work setting, so they would have high levels of stress potentially. Surely there's going to be a limit. There still would have to be, it could be slightly raised, but it wouldn't be too high, because obviously the level is 5 or lower for total cholesterol. So are you saying that if someone has a level of stress, it could be slightly just elevated, maybe between 5 and 6, obviously if it's still over 6, that's going to be something that we still have to focus on adjusting their diet with, as opposed to it being completely related to stress, if you know what I mean.
Well, here's the radical thing. From looking in depth at the works of people like Professor Tim Noakes, who's made it his life's work to study the area of cholesterol, insulin response, and heart disease, and Gary Taubes and a woman called Nina Teicholz. They've all got best-selling books on Amazon and lots of talks and TED Talks and things on YouTube. It was new to me to realize, and I don't necessarily expect you to just take this on board straight off. Go and have a look at it, see what you think. But they all are very clear in saying that cholesterol is an arbitrary number. So the fact that cholesterol is set at 5, like that's the cutoff point. Anything higher than that is like dodgy ground. It's an arbitrary number. It doesn't show anything. And actually, even if you want to measure it, cholesterol is raised by eating high sugar foods rather than high fat foods. So the more animal fat you eat doesn't necessarily raise cholesterol. The people with the highest cholesterol levels often will be eating a plant-based diet. Hence you get kind of lean runners who sometimes drop dead of a heart attack. But even around the area of heart attack, it's not related to cholesterol. Now, this all goes back because you think, well, why? What? How is this the case? And I remember hearing about this as a vegan years ago. A guy called Ansel Keys came up with the heart health hypothesis back in, I think, the 1950s, to say that cholesterol was related to heart disease. He was funded very heavily by the vegetable oil industry because that was kind of coming up as this new industry at the time. Because vegetable oil is so cheap to produce, and it's a very unhealthy, rancid oil, but it's very cheap to produce. It's got long shelf life, and they had a big push to promote this as the new heart healthy oil. They kind of funded or bankrolled Ansel Keys' hypothesis because they were able to put 80% of their profits back into marketing because the profits were so high. Yeah. But that hypothesis has never been proven. And again, that was news to me. So I really had to just like go back to ground zero and say, okay, a lot of what I thought to be true is not true. Let's look at this. Certainly the work of Gary Taubes is really interesting. His books are like, one of his books is like 800 pages long. I haven't waded through that whole thing, but you can get like the shorter versions of good fats, bad fats, something about calories. Are all calories equal? I think one of his books is called. Very, very interesting, and goes because his background is an investigative journalist. So he's got a weird like combination of his skills. He's I think a biochemist and a physics professor, but with an investigative journalist background as well. So he's kind of linked the two and looked at the political side of the food agenda, and especially like cholesterol. Yeah, it was news to me, but these guys are very clear, and I'm interviewing Professor Tim Noakes on this subject next week for my podcast, so you might want to listen to that. Yeah. But he says, if any doctor says to you, your cholesterol is too high, we need to get you on statins, just say to them, show me one paper which links high cholesterol to heart disease and I'll take the statins, and they won't be able to find one. So I don't know, I'd be interested to see if you can find one, Neil, but these guys are convinced that there's no link.
Yeah, I mean, so now I was saying in terms of, I would never advise people to go on statins to improve their cholesterol, because obviously it's generally a masking agent. It's not going to treat more of the problem. But obviously there's so much you can look into in terms of the LDL, triglyceride levels, HDL levels. So obviously all those play a role as well, as opposed to just the overall cholesterol level. But in terms of, because if you're saying you were feeling clearer in your mind, if you're having more meat, obviously you're going to be maybe having some more fish, so you're getting more omega-3s and 6s, so that's your brain food, so that's why probably you're going to feel a lot more clear. But in terms of the relationship between the two, what percentage would you say now you're having plant-based with meat-based? Because obviously I always advise at least a couple of meals, 2 or 3 meals a week without meat, just to
Yeah.
try and encourage more greens, on your plate, to try and get more of your five a day, because most people struggle with just five a day. What's your general balance throughout the week now you're having a combination of the two, as opposed to what it was before? So
Yeah. So I'm just trying to think, what in terms of calories would you say, as opposed to like proportion of my plate? That's probably a better way of
yeah,
answering
just
it.
proportion really. Just
So if I start off by saying that every day my aim is to have 10 vegetables, that's always my aim. That's been my aim for 10 years or more. Am I getting 10 vegetables? So I start the day with my wheatgrass juice, one portion of veg. I will often have a green smoothie, which will have, spinach, celery, cucumber, lemon or lime juice. So that's another 4. I always class like the alkaline fruits like lemons, limes, grapefruits as my kind of veg as well. And then I usually have an avocado somewhere throughout the day. So we're already at like maybe 6 portions. And then have some maybe buttered steamed vegetables. So maybe broccoli, carrots, cauliflower. So I eat a lot of cruciferous vegetables. So that's always my aim, to get in 10 portions of vegetables a day. Don't always do it, but usually around about 8 or 9 kind of minimum. And then on top of that, I don't eat meat every single day, but I would say almost every day. And on the days when I'm not eating meat, I'm certainly having like an omelette with maybe 3 eggs and some organic cheese. I managed to get raw cheese from our local farm as well, so I'll have some of that. So every day now, which I didn't think I would say a few years ago, I'm having meat or dairy or fish. But I always have our focus, and my husband and I have talked about this, and we're very clear that we will only have wild caught fish. So yeah, things like kita salmon, sockeye salmon. Being where we live here in the southwest, I'm able to go to our local fishmongers, and it's caught straight off,
yeah,
from the fishing trawlers around here. So wild caught fish, organic and pasture raised meat. So I again order from our local farm. I get a veg box and a meat box as well. And dairy, if I can, I get raw milk, but I do have to travel to get that. But otherwise, yeah, organic and preferably unhomogenized and grass fed milk, and certainly free range and organic eggs as well. So yeah, most days. So in terms of percentage, I wouldn't want to say 50-50, but I don't know. It might be as much as 50% in terms of calories, between meat and fish and eggs and cheese, the whole animal-based spectrum. Might be about 50%. But if it's not, if it's less than that, what I'm doing is making up, as well as the vegetables. Fruit has gone down. I used to eat a lot of fruit. That's kind of come down now. But I will eat a lot of nuts and seeds. So a lot of almond butter, tahini, that kind of stuff. Coconut oil, coconut chips, coconut milk, like coconut everything. So yeah. So the things I don't eat: never eat vegetable oils. Never. Try to avoid as far as possible white refined sugar. Haven't eaten sugar in months and months. Occasionally, I might have a bit of tomato ketchup, but I won't go and eat anything with overt sugars in, really. I will have some fruit, maybe 2 or 3 pieces of fruit a week, but because I'm following now a more high fat, low carb diet, I tend to keep my fruit fairly low and make it up with leafy greens and things for my fiber. And
how has your body changed, or your body shape changed? Have you looked at your cholesterol in that time as well? Have you managed to see the difference between the high carb to the low carb, in terms of how your health is now?
Well, I haven't had any tests yet, and I would like to have some kind of health checks soon. But in terms of how I feel I had good mental clarity before, but I feel I've got even more mental sharpness and clarity now. Great energy. the period of time, so when I switched from a high carb diet to a low carb, high fat diet, it's well known, because I've gone kind of pretty much fully ketogenic. So my macro ratios are about 70 to 80% fats, good fats, about 10% protein, and about 5% carbs. So making such a radical switch, it's well known in the ketogenic research and things that there's a period of, can be up to a couple of months, but for me it was about 2 to 3 weeks, where my performance in terms of running and gym and cycling and things really went quite low. I was struggling. I felt like I had lots of energy, but when I tried to go and run, I just didn't have the fuel in the tank. And that's because my body was changing over from using mainly carbs and sugar as its primary fuel source to fats and ketones. But once I got over that 3-week hump, then just had loads of energy and have continued to have lots of energy. It's helped me to reduce any cravings between meals. I can now go much longer on a higher fat diet between meals, whereas before, I'd eat a smoothie for breakfast and maybe some oats or something, some porridge, and then a couple of hours later I'm hungry again and was having to eat lots of small meals throughout the day. I don't need to eat as often now. Body shape. So initially it took me a little while to adjust the portion sizes, because obviously with the difference in calories, 4 calories per gram of carbs and protein and 9 calories per gram in fats. When I monitored what I was eating, I found that I was eating about 3,000 calories a day to start with, on a higher fat diet, just because I was used to having big portions of high carb food. So I put on a little bit of weight initially. I've managed to normalize that now. I'm finding my kind of levels and I've lost weight again. And I'm confident moving forward that I'll be able to just maintain this level of fitness and energy. Other things I've seen, so my skin looks younger, definitely. I just feel better overall. I will look to get some tests done soon, because I'll be interested to see what they show, but in terms of how I feel, I feel great.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, if we're both kind of on the same page in terms of we do a lot of endurance, so obviously we're used to doing or fueling with the carbs if we're going to be burning so many calories all the time, but that's something that I am going to try and change around to. I want to do a bit more weight training, so more low carb, definitely. But do you think, from what we were talking about earlier with the research, that research is very good, but obviously because we can maybe view it with a critical eye, we can obviously have a bigger picture. But do you think when this gets leaked in the media, that's causing the confusion for people rather than trying to get them to learn the basics of nutrition? So obviously how you train your clients, but do you think that is what's causing this biggest obesity epidemic in a way, because people are so bombarded with these quick fixes or this diet, that in the end they've decided that I'm not going to even bother trying because whatever I'm doing is going to be wrong potentially? You think?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the case. I mean, even all of the plant-based doctors and, omnivorous doctors and researchers would all agree. So certainly people like Dr. Michael Greger, Dr. Neil Barnard, as well as the people I mentioned earlier in terms of all the fat research and things, they all say that the number one thing that mass media is marketing in terms of nutrition is confusion. So what you'll notice is, and my dad used to quite often send me reports saying, well, look, the BBC is saying that a more alkaline diet is good, or we need to be eating more vegetables. See, people are coming round to, what you've been kind of preaching for years, if you like. But invariably, you might start off reading one of these articles in mainstream media and you think, oh, look, they're coming on board with a more healthy diet. But I bet you 9 times out of 10, you get to the end of the report and what will it say? It will say, this is just initial research and more research needs to be done. Or, of course, you don't want to do anything too extreme. Everything in moderation is good. It rounds off with this thing, which makes the reader go, oh, well, who can really know? That the research isn't conclusive, so I'll just carry on doing what I was doing before. And I think you're right. Every week there's one report saying red meat is good for you, next week red meat is bad for you, this is going to cause high blood pressure, this is going to lower blood pressure. It's all so contradictory that I think the average person who is busy, I mean, we've got the luxury of this being our area of work, so I'm quite happy to sit and research for hours. That's my thing. But I appreciate not everyone wants to do that. But even for us professionals, it's a minefield out there, and you need to be really discerning. And most people haven't got the time or inclination to go, okay, a report says this, it makes a certain claim. Who's funded that research? Who's writing that research? What is their agenda? What is their background? What results have they had with this? Like, is there any double-blind randomized trials, or is it an association study? Because there's a very big difference between a study which gets people to say, so to self-disclose, like, what have you eaten over the last 2 years? Like, some of these studies that make big claims literally are just asking people what they've eaten. Now, I don't know about you, but with the clients I work with, they will all tell me, I eat a really healthy diet. And when I say, okay, what exactly have you eaten yesterday? Not 2 years ago, not last week, yesterday. And we analyze it. It's very different to what they think they're eating. They think it's healthy, and they think they're having maybe 1,600 calories. And often when we track it, it's like 2,500. So there's a big difference between a randomized control trial and an association study or a self-disclosure study. So all these things need to be factored in. And I think, the average person, just who's got time for that in this day and age? No one really. So it is a minefield for most people. Yeah.
And do you think as well, having been at university as well, there's a lot of people who spend their time, in that research area. But personally for me, and what was always been my passion, is helping more people, as it has been for you. But there seems to be a lot of people spending money on research, but they're not spending money on actually implementing it for people and education, basically. So we need more people to be educating young children, adults, everybody on the basics of nutrition and cooking skills. But they're spending all that money on research. It's kind of like, there needs to be. Do you think there needs to be a change in that sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, that's so true. And it's bizarre, isn't it? Because it's the same in other fields. What are the essential things that we need to master in life? We need to master our finances and money and managing our money and budgeting. Are we taught that in school? I certainly wasn't. Relationships, communication skills, how much are we taught about that? Psychology, unless you're studying formal psychology, but just the basics of being a reliable friend, being consistent and things. We're not taught these skills, and it's exactly the same with diet. Why aren't we taught good dietary practices and cookery skills? I think education focuses far too much on, looking back to high school, why did I need calculus exactly? I've got a calculator. Anything I want to do, I can do on this. I don't, and I'm not an engineer, so I didn't need that training. It would have been much better to learn budgeting and finance skills or business.
So carry on from where you were, Laura. Sorry.
Where did we get to?
Just talking about budgeting.
I just think we're not taught these things in school, and it makes no sense. The things that we need in life to succeed are kind of downplayed and downgraded, and a lot of superfluous skills that might be good for our egos and to have a bit of paper saying we passed, a GCSE or an A level or a degree or whatever, is all very well. But I just look back to university and I'm not using half that stuff now. And I think, and I know you're the same because you've got, you've done a lot of research yourself, but we need to self-educate ourselves. We need to take responsibility for our own, our own success in life, because what is important to master in this life? Certainly what we eat, because it affects everything else. You only get one body. If that's going downhill, it affects every other area, doesn't it? So obviously mind health, body health, spirit health is of supreme importance. So if you don't do anything else in life, focus on that.
Yeah.
would be my view anyway.
I mean, what do you think? Because there's a lot more in the media currently with talking about obesity again. Obviously, it's in the media quite a lot. But what would you feel would need to change in terms of reducing the obesity epidemic in the UK and globally? What would you feel would be one of the main things that people could address, or just the governments could address to try and solve these issues? Obviously, we've got the sugar tax that's kind of come into force now, but what would you feel could they could maybe implement, or what would you be your standpoint on it? Or how would you have the opportunity to implement or change people's
Well,
relationship with food? So
I think, I've got a passion for exercise. I know you have too. But I think there's too much of a focus on exercise and trying to lose weight through going to the gym, going running, whatever, to burn that off. What's the phrase? Abs are made in the kitchen, not in the gym. And I think it's the same just in terms of body composition in general. And you and I both see at the gym, and I don't want to be sexist, but it normally is women that I see who will maybe run for a mile and then cross train for 10 minutes. So they've done a full 20 minutes in the gym, and it's at a low level. So they might burn 150 calories, maybe 200 calories. And then they'll do that's their exercise done, go down and have a shower, and then sit with their friends and have a cappuccino and a cookie.
yeah,
Or a healthy bit of toast and margarine or whatever, and I'm looking at it thinking there's at least 400 or 500 calories in that, so whatever you just done hasn't compensated. And then they're wondering why they've been at the gym for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years and not losing any weight. I think we need to focus on getting nutrition sorted, because we're not going to out exercise, or we're not going to train away a bad diet. And I know that myself, because as a marathon runner, I could at times put on weight if I was eating too much and eating too much of the wrong things, because for a little while I got into the trap of thinking, well, I've just run 26 miles so I can eat what I want. And it doesn't work like that. You've got to be fueling yourself in the right way. And also you have to factor in the addictive power of foods. I think we have this tendency to think that obese people just need more willpower. They just need to get in that gym more, and they need more willpower, and then they'll be all right. But yeah, as we've talked about, gym probably isn't the answer. Get your nutrition sorted first. And absolutely, is exercise good? Of course. Yeah, for a whole host of reasons: body composition, toning, cardiovascular health, mental health, wonderful. But in terms of like pure weight loss, it's been proven time and time again not to be the most effective thing. But certain foods are addictive and other foods aren't. White refined sugar is supremely addictive. So yeah, and the studies around, I know we don't have high fructose corn syrup much in the UK here, but certainly in America. But either way, the research done on soda drinks, so diet sodas and full sugar soda drinks, show that if you just have one can of cola or whatever a day, that increases your likelihood of, and there's only maybe 150 calories in that one can if it's full sugar, but that alone is like a huge indicator for obesity, because of just what it contains and its addictive nature and everything else. So yeah, I think we need to realize that not all calories are equal. It's probably better to have a 300 calorie avocado than a 150 calorie can of Coke in terms of trying to lose weight over the long term. So I think we probably need to be just look at things more holistically for tackling the obesity issue. And it's been shown that if you look at the brains, if you study the brains of obese people with normal weight people, their brains act very differently, and different parts of their brains light up when they eat food. So one of the research studies I read showed that it studied children because they haven't had the years of kind of conditioning and things. But a child that's given sweets that's not obese will have loads of energy and want to go outside and run and play and burn off that energy. An obese child given that same chocolate bar or whatever won't go, I've just, my body's just received energy, I want to go and burn it off, it will go, just had some sugar, I want some more, and we'll be looking in the cupboards and things for the next chocolate bar. So that was interesting to find out as well. And I thought, over the years, I've certainly been guilty of thinking, why don't these people just have more willpower? Why don't they just lose weight? But there's a lot of stuff going on in their brains which is different to people of normal weight. So I think all these things need to be considered, really. I think the sugar tax is probably a good thing. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think it's anything they can do to kind of discourage people consuming, processed, sugary drinks, as a lot of kids do, then it's just going to be a beneficial, obviously, because you vote with your money, and that's going to encourage more people to purchase water or other healthier alternatives. So, it's going to be a good thing, just like the plastic, plastic bag tax. That's kind of helped massively as well in terms of plastic waste as well. So, but in terms of like a vegan perspective, not necessarily a plant-based perspective, I always quite find it's funny that a lot of people, when they go to like more of a plant-based diet, automatically feel because they've given up meat and dairy, they're on a healthier diet, obviously without the basics of basic nutrition. But what's your take on a lot of the vegan products that are out there? Because it's vegan, they'll still have like a vegan chocolate bar as opposed to a normal chocolate bar. I think that's a healthier alternative, but it's still very calorie laden, and people aren't calorie aware that it's still a load of calories in it. So do you come across that a lot with clients that you work with or other people?
Yeah, absolutely. And not so much clients that I work with, because I don't really coach vegans as such. I've coached people who want to go plant-based or whatever, but not vegans. That's never really been my area of working with people. But it's one of the main reasons why I stopped being plant-based as well, that I didn't mention earlier, is that over the years, I went completely plant-based in 2010. And at that time, and you will know this as well, you become very savvy at finding your certain brands and shops and things that sell, the more natural vegan products, because I just didn't want to go vegan. And a lot of people I meet at vegan events are just, their only concern is veganism. All they care about is the animals. And I don't care whether it's got hydrogenated fat in and soy isolates and, a ton of sugar. They're not fussed. As long as it's vegan, that's the supreme goal here. That's never been my aim. My aim has always been health. And if that means that I choose a plant-based product over an animal-based product, good. If I was to find that the animal-based one is healthier, I'm happy to be malleable. I'm happy to switch accordingly. And what I found over the years is, so one example which was really getting on my nerves for a few months before I made the switch from plant-based to including animal products, was I really liked coconut yogurt. And there was 2 brands that sold organic coconut yogurt. It was really nice, really loved it. And then one of the brands started mixing in soy with it. And I was like, I don't want soy, because even in my view, non-organic soy has still got a lot of plant estrogens and things in. So, and I just didn't want a soy product. I wanted coconut yogurt. So I had to just then go with the one brand. And then sure enough, a couple of years later, that one was now a coconut and soy yogurt. So I'm like, okay, stop eating that then. And then in terms of like vegan cheeses, so most vegan cheeses are supremely unhealthy. And I know, big supermarkets where we live have just introduced these soy-based vegan cheeses, and the whole vegan community is going mad over it. Wow, isn't this amazing? These supermarkets going plant-based, full of junk and rubbish. 90% of the ingredients are bad, from maltodextrin, again, soy protein isolates, and it doesn't say GMO free, so it could well be genetically modified, carrageenan, things like that, so dextrose, so just a cocktail of chemicals. But there was a few vegan cheeses that I really liked that were more natural and healthy, but sure enough, they started bringing in things like modified maize starch. So it's like more and more these plant-based foods were becoming less discerning in their ingredients choices. So my choice of foods became narrower and narrower. And when I found out that actually sourced animal foods and saturated fats are good, I'm like, okay, cool, I'm happy to go with full fat Greek organic yogurt, and made the switch quite easily. So yeah, I think a lot of vegan products are really unhealthy, and that's why many vegans will struggle with health. Thankfully, being a vegan or plant based as long as I was really healthy over that time. But that was because I was very discerning what I ate, and I always ate a ton of vegetables and ate natural products as far as possible.
Yeah. It's a really good point, actually, because as you were talking, that was the first thing that I thought about was the vegan cheeses, because I know I compared just normal cheese to the vegan cheese, and there was more saturated fat in the vegan cheese than there was
Really? Huh.
well, it literally was about the same. Actually, there wasn't much difference, and the price was, twice as much for the vegan
Yeah,
cheese as it was for the normal cheese. And this,
yeah,
that was one of my passions as well, is getting more people to just have more plant-based meals rather than feeling like you got to give up meat and then go and spend a fortune on a meat replacement and it tastes like meat. I mean, that's coming, obviously that's getting more and more in the mainstream now, of all these kind of plant replacement or meat free replacement products. But
mhm.
as you've mentioned, they are full of a lot of junk, so you're better off having good quality meat, as we mentioned earlier, and probably less of it, but
Yeah,
enjoy it, because you're going to get better nutrients, you're going to have less processed products in it, as
yeah,
opposed to just consuming all this like processed fake stuff. Yeah,
yeah, for sure.
yeah, no, it's a very, very good point. I think the points we've touched on throughout the whole chat today has been really good, Laura. I would say one last thing that I want to, if you can give my listeners, what would be your biggest tip in terms of just adopting more of a healthier plant-based diet? That doesn't mean giving up meat or dairy, as we've mentioned a few times,
Mhm.
but because obviously your journey was, it's been a long journey, as mine
Mm,
has. So it's always, it's always evolving, always trying to learn and improve. But
sure.
what would be the biggest takeaway for people listening to say, right, I want to include more plant-based meals in my diet. I want to kind of maybe cut down a bit of meat and dairy, but I'm not going to give it completely. How would you approach that? Would be the best thing that they could take away from today
Mm.
to adopt that?
So I would say I always have to say, and I've maintained this for at least 10 years. I've been preaching the same thing. Vegetable fats just need to go. Like whatever else you do, just get rid of, especially hydrogenated fats, but any vegetable fats. So you're talking vegetable oil, cottonseed oil, soybean oil, canola oil if you're in the US, or rapeseed oil over here, margarines. They're so missold, those margarines that say heart healthy oils or whatever. It's so not heart healthy. It's anything but. Those oils are rancid. They cause massive inflammation. That they are the things that clog up arteries and cause heart disease. So get those out of your diet. And in terms of something you could add in, you can't do better than leafy green vegetables. So anything chlorophyll rich, so anything dark green. Okay, so yeah, dark leafy green vegetables. So anything chlorophyll rich, because chlorophyll is only one molecule different from our own blood's hemoglobin, which means that it's a wonderful blood builder, blood cleanser. It's got tons of antioxidants and vitamins and minerals and things. So, and that was the whole premise of my book, The Alkaline 5 Diet, is increase the leafy greens, the alkaline forming foods, so things rich in like potassium, magnesium, calcium.
Yeah,
So those would be my biggest two things. Get rid of all vegetable oils, and these aren't the things that you can say, well, I'll have a little bit here and there. These things clog our arteries,
yeah,
over the long term. It's as bad for you as smoking. So get rid of that, increase the leafy greens, and just by doing those two things, I think our listener will see a good, some benefits. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Brilliant. Well, I think there's probably the perfect time to leave it there, because it's a really great message for everyone to listen and take on board. Two simple changes that they can make in their lifestyle to improve their health. But thank you very much, Laura, for being on the Plant Revolution podcast. It's been a pleasure catching up with you again, having a chat.
Mhm.
And yeah, so yeah, if you want, Laura, just where can we find out more about you, and how can people get in touch with you if they want to discuss, about your book or
Mhm.
what you're doing at the moment? So
Okay, yeah. So my book, The Alkaline 5 Diet, you can buy in major bookshops and Amazon. Yeah, it's been translated into several different languages, so you'll easily find that online. My website, I've got two main websites. So laurarimmer.com, that's LauraRiMmer.com. And alkalinedietshealth.com as well. And both sites have a lot of free resources. And yeah, if you'd like to get in contact for coaching or anything like that, then be happy to have a chat with you. My podcast, Eternal Health, is out every week. And as I say, I've got some interesting interviews lined up. I'm really looking forward to interviewing Professor Tim Noakes in the next couple of weeks. And I've had on in the past people like Dr. Joel Furman, who was super interesting, talked about his book, Fast Food Genocide. Yeah. So, yeah, really, really interesting that was. He packed no punches in saying that fast food is like genocide. So that was interesting. So, yeah, those are the places you can find me. So thanks for having me on, Neil.
No, thanks, Rob. What I'll do, I'll also put all the links to your website in the show notes as well, so people can access them. And obviously find you that way if they've missed anything on the show as well.
Yeah, wonderful. Right. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you. I'll just So, hope you enjoyed the episode, guys. It was a really, really insightful interview. Like I said, I really enjoyed speaking to Laura for a good over an hour there, and just really highlighting some really good, insightful topics about adopting more of a plant-based diet and why sometimes excluding meat and dairy is not always going to provide some benefits to your lifestyle. So, and also the environment as well. So some really good, insightful topics discussing about the contradictive elements of the impact on the environment and how a lot of research can be quite biased in certain areas, whether they're more promoting more of a plant-based diet, a vegan diet, for example, or trying to promote the meat industry. So it was really good. Hope you guys really enjoyed that. Thank you guys for listening in today. And if you really enjoyed that podcast, that episode, then again, please head over to iTunes, lend us a nice review, and we'll give you a shout out on the next episode. And again, thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you again next time.
The podcast you just heard was recorded with Anchor. If you want to make your own, download the Android or iOS app completely free from anchor.fm/podcast. That's anchor.fm/podcast.